All right, gentlemen.
Hello.
My name is Asher Wertheimer, your host of hosts. This is History Shmistory, where we're going to try and figure out what historical stories are true, what historical stories are fabricated by your beloved host, and we're going to compete in this ruthless arena. Pat Fitzgerald, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. And I'm also not
wait.
sideways.
Yeah, there you go. That's the positive thing. A point. You know what? A point for Pat for not being sideways.
What?
We're gonna give a point for Pat.
Nice.
I won't be sideways in the final edit, though.
Yeah, but it's what it counts. Wade Foster, are you ready?
Yes, indeed.
All right, so let's get into it. Basically, the way this is going to work, guys, I've explained it to you, but I'm going to explain it to them now, too, is I'm going to tell three historical stories. I'm going to ask you questions throughout, and at the end of all three, you're going to guess which stories were true, which stories were false. Each question that I ask you is worth 1 point, and at the end, each time you guess correctly, true or false, is worth 5 points. So, it's a comeback opportunity. Some of these episodes, hopefully we're all going to be recurring contestants. Some of these episodes are going to have 3 stories that are entirely true, 3 stories that are entirely false, a jumble of whatever. Some of them will have themes, some of them will just be random stories like today. And you know what? We'll play it by ear, right? Are you ready to go?
Yes, sir.
Alright, let's kick it in a high gear. We're going to start with the story of crazy Colonel Boris Pierce. I got my notes here. So, Colonel Pierce was a colonel in the British Expeditionary Force. He was born on a farm just outside Whitby, England in 1910, right? Pierce was known for being a bit of a crazy child. You know, all kids are a little wacky, but Pierce was especially bizarre and rambunctious, I guess you could say. For example, when his younger sister Charlotte came down with pneumonia in 1925, the 15-year-old Pierce saved her life. Your first question is, how did he do it? Did he A, feed her chicken soup all day, B, run into town and physically drag the doctor out of his office and force him to come home with him, or C, make her a broth of cow manure and boiled milk every morning? All right, Pat, What do you think the answer was?
I have to say C.
Pat says C. He says that he made her a broth of cow manure and boiled milk every morning.
That is correct.
Wade?
I went with B.
He went with B, that he physically dragged the doctor out of his office and forced him to ride home with him. Well, we tie things up. Wade gets a point. It was B. He rode into town. This is the dead of winter, keep in mind. Pat, no, I'm done. I'm not. He forces the doctor out of the office and onto his horse and takes him back to his house, thereby getting his sister treatment and saving her life. So that's just one example of how Pierce was a wacky lad. When he grew up, he turned age 18, he joined the British Expeditionary Force, and he slowly rose up to the ranks to become colonel. Now, a colonel, as you know, is a pretty high-ranking position in an army. And he stood out amongst all other colonels because he was, like I said, absolutely insane. One example of how he exhibited this insanity was he always went with his soldiers on dangerous missions. Why did he do this? So, your second question. What was the explanation he always gave when asked why a high-ranking officer would follow his soldiers into battle? A. It is only a coward who dies a coward's death. B. How can I ask men to die for me if I will not die for them? Or C. Were I the king, I would cast my scepter and crown aside for a hand grenade and an Enfield. No, that's copyrighted. We can't. All right. We'll go Wade this time. Wade, what did you say?
I went with A.
Went with A. It is only a coward who dies a coward's death. All right. Hard words. Pat?
I went for C.
You went for C. Were I the king, I would cast my scepter and crown aside for a hand grenade and an Enfield. Well, we remain tied. It was in fact B. How can I ask men to die for me if I will not die for them?
This guy doesn't sound that crazy.
Yeah, I'm going for the crazy ones.
You're going for a really wacky. Well, don't worry. It's going to get really wacky in a moment here.
All right.
The colonel did a lot of things in his tenure in the British Expeditionary Force, most notably World War II. So he was obviously a part of the military at the time. He engaged in a lot of military decisions and also went along with his men. There are way too many stories to get into now with only a 30-minute timeline, but what we're going to talk about here are the events of June 6th, 1944. See, some men under the colonel's command stormed Normandy with the D-Day invasions. Particularly...
What war is this?
What? You have a question, raise your hand! So, they stormed Sword Beach, and the colonel went along with them. Now, on storming the beach, their landing craft became caught on a Chechen hedgehog, which is one of those big wooden, barriers that they have. It's basically like a triangle barrier and another log laid on top of that stops landing crafts from landing. There are also those big metal, caltrop looking things you see on the beaches. So, one of their landing crafts, the one that the colonel was in, ran up on one of these wooden ones and couldn't drop its ramp to deploy its soldiers. So, caught in the surf, the colonel had to think fast to get his men out of what was essentially a sitting duck situation. How did he do it? Did he A, hoist all of them over the side, acting as sort of a ladder, and climb over himself last? B, drive the ship up the barrier like Fast and Furious? Or C, break down and cry? Pat, what did you say the colonel did?
I said B.
B, he drove the ship up the ramp like Fast and Furious. All right.
Yes.
Pat, or Wade, what did you say?
I also said B.
Well, we remain tied. You were both right. He did indeed take the helm from the soldier and ram that thing up the wooden plank. It capsized. Everyone got spilled out, but luckily it wasn't deep enough for everyone to drown, and they made it ashore. Now, we're currently at 2-2, okay? So, upon landing on Sword Beach, the British... I need you for entertainment, Pat. You can't eat Tide Pods. The British were faced with a dug-in German army. Obviously, we all know the events of Omaha Beach from various movies, including Saving Private Ryan. Sword Beach was nowhere near that deadly, but it was, in fact, dangerous. Of the close to 2,000 men that stormed in one day, 683 died on Sword alone. They faced German pillboxes, machine gun nests, mortar crews, stuff like that. So of the 683 that died, how many were under the colonel's command? Is it A, 6, B, 12, or C, none? Wade, go ahead. How many died? 6, 12, or none?
Going with none.
All right, you chose C, none. Pat?
I am also going with C, none.
Well, you're both right. It was C. No soldiers under Colonel Pierce's command died while storming Sword Beach. Now, that's not to say that they didn't die later, but we'll get to that. So, the battalion eventually, the entire force, the French, the British, and the Americans, all pushed through. They all secured their beachheads and pushed forward. So, this was the foothold that the Allies needed to push into France and was a turning of the tide in the war. After the beaches were secured, though, there were a bunch of other objectives that needed to be taken. Pierce's command was charged with taking a particular town in the inland of France. This town, they thought, would just be a strategic point to hold. But they didn't know that the Germans were secretly dug in this tiny little town, mainly because it had a bridge that acted as sort of a funneling system for the soldiers. So they figured it's a hard point to lose. How did the Colonel Pierce, get his men out of a sticky situation while pinned down in a house in this town? His soldiers' lives were in danger. How did he save them? Did he A, blow up a tank with a single rocket, B, shoot himself, or C, throw someone else on a grenade? All right, Pat, what did you say?
Said C.
He said C. He threw someone else on a hand grenade. All right, Wade?
B.
B. He shot himself. Well, an interesting take. But I gotta give it to Pat. He threw someone else on a hand grenade. Now, this isn't as cut and dry as it sounds.
Yeah, I was about to say, is it?
Yeah, just sacrificing someone else. No, Pierce, aside from being a mad lad, was also incredibly intelligent, and he had come to believe that his command was leaking information to the Germans. There's a reason he chose a particular battalion to storm the beach with. He believed that the lieutenant in charge of that battalion was a turncoat and had betrayed his country to the Germans. He was so secure in his belief of this that when a grenade was thrown through the window of the building his battalion was in, he grabbed the lieutenant, threw him onto the hand grenade, killing him and saving the rest of the soldiers. So, obviously, this resulted in a court-martialing. Yeah, Pat?
Was he leaking information? The lieutenant?
Well, here's what happened. It resulted in a court-martialing. The colonel was dishonorably discharged. He was imprisoned. He was brought forth on charges of, obviously, murder and, treason and whatnot. But because of his high standing and his great reputation, he convinced the court to look into the matter. What did they find? Did they find that A, the colonel was crazy and was imagining things, or B, the man really was a traitor? Wade's all set. All right, Wade, we'll start with you. What do you think?
A.
Thinks A, the colonel was out of his gourd. All right. Pat, what about you?
I also think A.
You also think A, he was crazy. Well, Pat remains in the lead. He was right. The colonel was right. The lieutenant had been leaking information such as attempting to leak the time and place of the landing. Luckily, he failed in that respect, as we all know. There's a whole campaign to deceive the Germans. But he was leaking information. The colonel's status was reinstated. The war was over by then, but he was given an honorable discharge with full pensions and whatnot. Now, with his discharge, he left the army and retired and lived out the rest of his life, dying how? How did the great and insane Colonel Boris Pierce meet his end? A, at 83, laying in his bed, surrounded by his 10 children. B, after being caught by Soviet spies during the Cold War when he served Britain as a spy. Or C, salmonella.
Who?
Salmonella, the disease.
I don't know who Sal is or why he's relevant now. Let's just get.
Who's Sal? Why would he hurt the colonel?
He hurt the colonel.
Why
I
would he do
Sal.
that? All right, Wade is set. Pat is set. Wade, what do you think?
B.
B. He became a spy and was captured by Soviet spies and died that way. All right, Pat, what do you think?
I could easily just keep voting what Wade says and just win the game, therefore. But I'm going to say C instead.
You're saying C. Well, he was killed by that great enemy we all know, uncooked egg. It was salmonella. He was old when he contracted it and couldn't fight off the infection. So, thus ends the story of Colonel Boris Pierce. Pat, currently, after our first tale, is in the lead with 5. Wade is close behind with 3. Still definitely chances to catch up here. You have to keep in mind at the end we're going to guess which ones were true and which ones were false. And you can earn a lot of points that way. Moving on. The next story we will tell is a little bit whimsical. Has a little bit of a fairy tale feel to it. And that is the story of Woolpit. So, in 12th century, in the town of Woolpit, England, 2 children on a bright summer's day appeared, seemingly out of nowhere. These children were very, very bizarre in a lot of respects, and I won't ask you about all of them, so I'll just tell you. They spoke an unknown language. They had green skin, wore strange clothes, and refused to eat anything until they were offered what? A, rats, B, yarrow root, or C, raw lima beans. Wade, we'll start with you. What did the children eat?
Lima beans, C.
You say lima beans. All right, and Pat, what do you say?
Rats.
He says rats. Well, the lead narrows. Wade is right. They refuse to eat anything but raw lima beans. So, these bizarre children were taken in by the town. They were taught English. As they became accustomed to the local food, they slowly lost their green hue. And the village eventually decided to officially adopt them and baptize the children in the Christian faith. What happened when they baptized these kids? And this one is a free write. I want to know what you think happened when they baptized the children.
Oh no.
Pat, what'd you say?
I said,
What you say? Sorry, go on.
Colonel Pierce showed up, driving a U-boat in through the wall of the church with his pal Salmonella.
Wow, I like the creativity. I gotta give it to you. Wade, what'd you say?
Back then, I think there were more baptisms in rivers, so I think one of the kids might have gotten swept away by the current in the river.
You know, I really want to give it to Pat for the creativity, but Wade is closest. He wasn't swept away by the river, but shortly after being baptized, there's a boy and a girl, the boy became ill and died. Now, obviously, take that as you will. After being baptized, he becomes sick, but you know, whatever. He became sick and died. That's all we know. The girl, however, survived and went on to lead a mildly happy life, as happy as you can in 12th century England. She learned English and explained that they came from a subterranean land where the sun never shone and where people's skin were green. What did she call this land? A, St. Elmo's Land, B, St. Paul's Land, or C, St. Martin's Land? All right, Pat's all set. Wade's all set. Wade, we'll start with you this time. What do you think?
I know Elmo's usually associated with red, but I'm going with it still. St. Elmo. A.
St. Elmo's Land. Wade, what'd you say? I mean, Pat, what'd you say?
Yes. I said B.
You said B, St. Paul's Land. Well, points for nobody. It was St. Martin's Land.
Ooh.
Evoking a feel of, if I may say so myself, Martians. Question mark? Is that where the word came from? No, because it's Mars. So, anyway, this girl would go on to marry a man from King's Lynn, which is about 40 miles from Woolpit, where she was found. She served in a court of a royal person and was called, I believe, incredulous and very headstrong. She was given a Christian name, which was what? A, Beatrice, B, Agnes, or C, Carla? Wade's all set. Pat's all set. Pat, what did you say?
Said A. That's B. A.
Beatrice. Wade, what'd you say?
I said A as well.
Beatrice. Well, we remain tied at 5 because it was Agnes. She became known as Agnes. She lived out the rest of her life and died in an unremarkable manner. And thus ends the story of the Green Children of Woolpit. Now, we're tied 5-5. A good way to go into our final tale, which is a doozy. All right, hold on to your hats for this one, boys, because we're going to learn about the lost Pharaoh of Egypt. So, as you know, pharaohs pass down by lineage like kings. The father dies, the son becomes, the ruler, and the oldest son becomes the ruler before the youngest son. So, Pharaoh Amun II assumed power after his father, Amun I, died. This man, this pharaoh, was incredibly paranoid. I mean, he gives Nixon a run for his money. So, when he first assumed office, what was one of his first decrees? A, he ordered all of his father's counselors murdered and replaced. B, he ordered a shaman to tell him who his future assassins would be. Or C, he hired a body double that would appear for him at public events. All valid choices, I must say. All right, Pat, we'll start with you.
I said A.
You said A. He ordered all of his father's counselors murdered and replaced. All right. Wade, what about you?
I said B.
You said B, a shaman to tell him his future assassins. Well, one of you pulls in the lead, and it's Pat. He murdered everyone that his father relied on for counsel and replaced them with brand new people. Aside from being paranoid, this pharaoh, Amun II, he was super into building things, and he built a lot. He improved a lot of infrastructure in his time as pharaoh, including he built the longest aqueduct in the world at the time. He built a pyramid gilded in marble. And what else did he create? A, 100 brothels. B, an ancient soup kitchen. Or C, a car?
I think I know which one I'm voting for. Definitely a car.
All right, we're all set. Wade, what'd you say?
I said B.
Said B, an ancient soup kitchen. All right, Pat, what did you say?
Said A.
You said A, 100 brothels. Definitely an ambitious endeavor. But it was indeed B. He built an ancient soup kitchen. His idea was that if you kept the servants and the people at the bottom happy, they wouldn't cause any trouble. So he made a soup kitchen that gave out free food. It's the first known
100
instance.
brothels would do that as well.
Well, true.
I was just thinking that a little bit.
Yeah, I guess he's thinking Maslow's hierarchy of needs right now. But, that's true. That's true. Despite all of his delusions, there was one event that he always celebrated in public. What was it? Was it A, their New Year's, B, his birthday, or C, executions? All right, we are locked in. Wade, what'd you choose?
B for birthday.
You said B for birthday. He always celebrated his birthday in public. All right, Pat, what did you choose?
I said C for killings.
C for killings. Well, your cynicism pays off, Pat. He did attend every public execution under his reign. Apparently, the guy had a heart for the morbid. And so he managed to get over his paranoia for that, but for other things, and not so much. For example, he was always, throughout his entire life, paranoid about being assassinated. Who wouldn't be? In one instance, his younger brother came to him and warned him that his council, the one that he had murdered and replaced, was planning on killing him. And that his brother, the Pharaoh, should flee the country until it was safe, until the conspirators within his new council had been rooted out. So what did this Pharaoh do? Did he A, take his loving brother's advice and flee the country, returning only when it was safe? B, hire extra protection and investigators to find the potential assassins? Or C, kill his brother for attempting to usurp his throne? Wade was real quick on that one. All right, Pat, what did you say?
What were the options again? I wasn't listening.
A point for Wade. No.
I'm going to say C, because that
He
sounds
murdered
like,
his brother for trying to usurp his throne. All right, Wade, what did you say?
I'm also saying C. We all have brothers. We understand.
Yeah, and is it murder if you're the god king of the land?
Yeah,
Is it really murder?
I mean, then technically no, but nowadays still no. The answer is you're both correct. He did in fact murder his brother because he believed he was plotting to take his throne, and then he had his entire cabinet killed and replaced just for good measure.
There you go. All bases covered.
Exactly. Just for the record, there was still today no evidence that any plot ever existed. Near the end of his life is when he earned his moniker. We know him, as I introduced this, as the Lost Pharaoh of Egypt. Why is he known as that? A, because in madness in his later years, he destroyed all of his creations, leaving over only bits and pieces of records of himself. B, he was erased from history by Cleopatra because she hated him. Or C, he literally wandered into the desert, got lost, and died. Wade, what do you think happened?
C, he was a desert wanderer.
C, he wandered into the desert and died, and that's why he's known as the Lost Pharaoh. Okay, Pat, what about you?
I said B.
You said B, Cleopatra erased him from existence. Well,
Data expunged.
we're going into the final round with a tie. He wandered into the desert alone, couldn't find his way back, and died. Pat, no! All right, so that concludes our 3 stories. Now the question remains, is this history or Shmistory? Remember, answering correctly earns you 5 points. I won't deduct points, I'm not that evil. We will start with the history of the crazy but brilliant Colonel. Do we think the story of the Colonel was true or false? History or Shmistory? Take some time, think it over. Colonel Boris Pierce. History or Shmistory? Pat, what do you think?
I said history.
You think he's true? Okay. Wade, what do you think?
Mystery. Didn't happen.
You think it didn't schmappen. All right, all right. Well, I would like to thank Pat for believing me because this was Shmistory. That man never existed. Pierce had elements of other soldiers that were absolutely mad lads, but I won't name them because they might come in later. Wade pulls in the lead. He now has 13 points. Pat has 8, but he can easily tie it up with this next question. The fairy tale story of the Green Children of Woolpit. History or Shmistory? We'll go with Wade first this time. Wade, history or Shmistory?
I think this one's history.
You think this one is history? All right, the truth, the truth. Pat, what do you think?
I think this one is also history.
Well, our gap does not narrow. This one is true. Both of you are right. There really are records of children arriving in Woolpit in the 12th century. Now, it's a little bit of a tricky one because there are records of it, but there are also a bunch of historians who say that this is just fairy tales or certain parts of the story are true, but they're false. But there are records from the time that document this occurrence. All right.
That's what my Google search said.
All right. You know what? Minus 20 points? No. So, with the final story and the final chance for points, the story of the lost Pharaoh of Egypt, Amun II. History or Shmistory? Pat, what do you say? What do you know?
Well, I think this one sounds familiar in the right ways, but the other one with the soldier also sounded familiar in the right ways. So I'm going to say Shmistory and hope that Wade says history and I got it right.
There you go. Shmistory on Pat's side. Wade, what do you know?
I do think this one is history, so we'll see here, Pat.
We'll roll hard. All right, well, this has literally never happened before in the history of this show. Mainly because this is the first episode, but we'll ignore that fact. But we have a tie. Pat's right. This is Shmistory. Never existed. There was a lost era of Pharaoh of Egypt, but maybe that Pharaoh will come back to make an appearance too. So we have a tie currently at 18. Now we're gonna have to have a tiebreaker round. I want you
Pat,
both.
if you didn't get that first point, I would have won.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
My arbitrary rules save the day. All right, so, gentlemen,
Clutch.
I want you both to write what you would be known for if you were a military commander. What great military event would you be known for if you were a commander? The best story, the best event, gets the point, gets the win.
And what is this? Any war?
Huh?
Is this any war?
Any war. Any war.
Any war. Any war. I didn't know I'd have to think for this.
I didn't know that this was going to require brain.
Alright, locked in.
Okay. I suppose I'll be locked into. Before it starts, Asher, I just want to say this is a really good show, and you're doing a very good job of hosting it. And I think I think
Hey, yeah, thanks. That's
yeah.
good. I'm
I hope
glad.
this question goes well.
Is there like a committee we can get some rules or?
Yeah. Wade, what story you got? It goes to Pat. No, I'm kidding. All right, Wade, you were locked in first, so let me hear it. What gallant event would you be known for?
All right, so during a siege on a castle in medieval times, I rode a horse straight through the outer wall to breach it and allow my men to get in.
Wow. All right. That's some gallant event. Pat, what do you got?
Back in well, it's not necessarily during a war. It was like right before it happened. But I was a very good driver for the military for Austria-Hungary. Very good driver, and I was able to in this one Serbian town drift around a corner so fast that I actually clipped a Serbian soldier. Well, not soldier, but pretty much terrorist. And actually, World War I didn't happen.
Wow.
There you go.
Huh.
But then I crashed the car, and it still happened.
I love them both, but I gotta give it to Pat for that optimistic viewpoint on how driving a car would save millions of lives.
Just don't stop.
Pat is our winner for there's your certificate. It says winner. I'm gonna hand it off to you right there.
Thank you so much. And
congratulations.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, thanks. That's good. That's real good. That's real nice. Congratulations, Wade. Next week you got your chance of redemption. But a brilliant game from both of you. Wonderful stories, I must say. Just spectacular. And to all of you watching, tune in next week. It's going to be a crazy one. I already got some things planned involving, like Wade said, horses and outer walls. But until then, we'll see you. Gentlemen, Pat Fitzgerald, thank you for joining me. Wade Foster, thank you for joining me.
Pleasure to be.